Well, you know what I think. I'm a Christian. I'm not going to deny that.
I do want everyone to feel comfortable, and that's why I'd like to talk to you about Jesus.
Please do not go religious.
Somebody's going to hell over this.
He better not.
Even the devil will speak the truth for his own purposes.
This is war.
Accept it.
Back to Jerusalem podcast.
Yeah, I'm back, and I'm armed with righteousness.
With your host, Eugene Bach.
He just seems like he's got it all figured out.
He's a righteous dude.
Yep.
Hey guys, I'm Eugene Bach with Back to Jerusalem, and this is a special podcast. I wanted to share a little bit about something that we've been talking about for a couple of years, but it doesn't seem like the mainstream media has agreed with us until now. Since 2020, we have basically been saying that the Chinese economy is going down. But everything that you've seen on mainstream financial reporting institutions is that the Chinese economy is going up. In 2020 and 2021, if many of you remember, or you do a time search, what you'll find is that the rest of the world was gushing and praising China for their lockdown strategies and basically sharing with the whole world that China has found a way to lock down their society and grow their economy. We at Back to Jerusalem, we're giving you information directly from the field, directly from the individuals on the ground inside of China, telling you exactly what they were experiencing. And even though that was not agreeing with mainstream media, we were still sharing it with you anyway. We were sharing about how the people were finding it very difficult to make money, to go to work. They weren't able to go to work. They weren't able to leave their home. In many cases, people were locked inside their apartments by chains and fences and even doors welded shut. And when we said to the Chinese, when we were talking to our Chinese partners on the ground and telling them what the rest of the world was hearing, we were sharing with them and saying, hey, right now we are hearing that the Chinese economy is doing well, even during lockdown, and that they are a model for the rest of the world. The Chinese were asking us very simple questions, rational questions. How can an economy grow when all of their major factories, stores, grocery stores are shut down? How can it continue? Yeah, online is helping us survive to be able to order food and order things that we need online. But for the most part, people ran out of money to buy things online because they were not able to go to work. Now, there was an economical shift, but the people that we have been reporting for on the ground inside of China have been saying over and over and over that the economy is going down. What makes us different at Back to Jerusalem than a lot of other organizations is that we work a lot in the private sector. We work quite a bit with businesses. Businesses provide the different covers that we need to go from China into other parts of the world. So we understand the supply and demand needed in the marketplace, not just in the spiritual side of the work that we do. So as we were working together with our Back to Jerusalem missionaries, and many of them being factory owners, many of them being shop owners, many of them directly involved in commerce, have been giving us updates, and we've been sharing those updates together with you. And we've been saying the economy is going down. Well, this week, we've seen banks shutting at a very rapid rate. In fact, just within 1 week alone, this month, we saw 40 banks close in 1 week. And now there are reports of 3,800 more banks soon to follow. Doors are closing. Loans cannot be repaid. And the Chinese economy is suffering big time. Why haven't you been hearing about this? Because so many people want to exalt China as being a representative of what it's like to be a communist country for the rest of the world, to show that they have pulled more people out of poverty than any other nation in the way that China has, more people out of poverty in a short amount of time than has ever been done in the history of the world. But here is the key. We've seen this many times, even from a study. I've shared about this on other podcasts. I've been talking about this many different times from many different aspects, but let me share it once again. I believe that the number one reason why we are seeing an economic collapse inside of China is because China has increased their persecution against Christians. Now, if the biblical reasons for God's blessing for those that bless his people are not enough for you, maybe you need more data, maybe you need more facts, and that's totally fine. I can give you many studies. There was recently a study that, and we put it into one of our articles that reports on these 40 banks that have closed inside of China in the last week. If you go to our website, you'll see a link that we have that directly points to two studies. One is done by Brigham Young University. Another one is done by George Washington University. And both of those studies used a data from 173 different nations, where they look at religious freedom and its direct relation to economic prosperity. Now, this is not a name it, claim it. This is not saying that, whoever becomes a Christian will become rich. This is not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that from studies that have been done, we can see a direct link between religious freedom and economic prosperity. In 2019, China began to ramp up their persecution against Christians, tearing down churches, tearing down crosses, burning Bibles, arresting pastors. We saw an increase in 2019 like we had not seen in the last 20 years. We've seen more persecution in China in the last 3 years than we have in the last 2 decades. And what followed directly in China was a nosedive of the Chinese economy. The two are directly linked. We see that over and over and over. Now, there are reasons that you can give for the economic problems that China is experiencing right now. If you read any of the news articles that are brave enough to print out what's actually really happening inside of China, what you'll hear is a smorgasbord of different reasons. And all of those reasons are true. China gave out bad loans. China owns the banks. When I say China owns the banks, the Chinese Communist Party runs all of the banks inside of China. And so for you to open up an account, you have to do it through a Chinese Communist Party approved lending institution. Because the Communist Party actually, in many ways, owns the banks, they also tell and dictate the banks who to give their loans to. There are individuals that are just meritoriously do not deserve loans, but they're getting loans anyway because that is a directive that comes from some of the party leaders. And so individuals that should not be getting loans are getting loans. Now, for the most part, we've seen a system that has stayed afloat because the economy has been on fire, and the Chinese, as a general rule for their culture, are absolutely amazing savers. They're aggressive with their saving practices, and that tends to work out very well for banks. However, neither of those two have been able to save the banks today. One, because even though this side with the Chinese being very good savers and putting their money into the bank and letting the bank use that savings that they put back and struggle to put back and live on very little of their income so that they can save the maximum amount of their income as possible. The banks have benefited from that. But from the other side, the economy side, the economy has been falling. And so you no longer have those two forces of a powerful economy and aggressive savers propping up bad loans. Now the bad loans are bubbling up to the surface. And it's starting to become more apparent with so many banks tanking, going underwater, going bankrupt. And we can find the aggressive construction that is taking place. I've lived in China for the last 25 years. I know the practices that have led to these bad loans. I know that there are cities, entire cities that were built that were basically ghost towns so that the Chinese economy can continue roaring just through the building boom, with the idea of build these cities and the people will come. And for the most part, that strategy turned out to be correct. As Christian freedom was going up, the economy benefited. It was almost like you couldn't be wrong with an investment in China. But once persecution started against the Christians in 2019, we saw a decisive point where the economy started to drop. And people can point to the epidemic breakout of the COVID-19 virus and the challenges that we saw and the reaction that we saw inside of China with the COVID-19. The whole world suffered from COVID-19, but the rest of the world is coming out of the economic disparity that was caused by this virus, whereas China is sinking deeper and deeper and deeper into their crisis. This is something that we continue to need to pray for our partners inside of China. I've been getting several factory owners that are believers that own factories inside of China have asked us at Back to Jerusalem to pray for them. In fact, just last week, I did a special connection between one of the largest factory owners that we work with inside of China with one of our largest distributors in the United States to see if there was any synergy that would be able to bless this brother's work. But the details that he gave me about the economic situation inside of China was dire, and it's not being reported. And that's why we wanted to share this together with you at Back to Jerusalem, to show the importance of what Christians do for society, but also what can happen to society when they turn their back on God's people. I want to thank you so much for joining us for another Back to Jerusalem podcast. Again, I'm Eugene Bach, your host for this time, coming to you live on delay from somewhere within the borders of China. God bless.